were talked about it, and then we saw a lull period, and now it's again being revived. What do you think? Are we still able to reap the benefits from this project in the context of the changing economic geographies that are taking place around us? And in order to do it moving forward, what needs to be done?
Thank you very much. I think I'm going to take my cue from Mr. Harun Sharif and Mr. Muid Yusuf today. And if I am allowed to be a little provocative, then I would first like to answer the question that Mr. Harun Sharif had raised. What have we learned from China? And what are the lessons that we can learn from China, whether it is in connectivity or in economic diplomacy or in politics or in governance and development? Having sort of watched China and worked with China for over 20 years, I'm afraid that the only dictum that we have followed, or the only thing that we have really clung to, or the only lesson that we have learned from China, leaving everything aside, is what Mao said in the early 50s: power flows from the barrel of a gun. So that's the only thing I think that we have believed in. And we haven't really learned anything else. But the sad part of it, that China has moved on from there. They left that philosophy far back. But unfortunately, we are still clinging on to. Having said that, as far as CPAC is concerned, I would like to sort of say that CPAC was always not really about connectivity and power projects only. Because without power projects and without connectivity, you couldn't go to what you really wanted, which is to make Pakistan the hub of, industry and production and export, and connect Central Asia and South Asia and Africa and Europe. The concept of CPAC was to actually connect all these emerging markets, which Mr. Harun Sharif referred to. So as far as CPEC is concerned, I think we've done pretty well. For that matter, I think the Chinese have done pretty well, because if you look at the projects of connectivity and infrastructure and power projects, then what has been achieved in 10 years is actually huge, and it is commendable. But as Mr. Harun said, what are we going to do with this infrastructure? What are we going to do with the energy that we have? Are we going to continue to produce this energy and have nowhere to use it and continue to keep paying the capacity charges? Are we going to use these fantastic roads that we have built to what? Marathons on them? These are enablers for a higher objective that we had, and that was to develop your industrial zones, to develop your special economic zones, and to make Pakistan an industrial hub, so that our economy could kickstart, so we could improve our exports. But have we been able to do that? Unfortunately not. Why? Was that the Chinese fault? I don't think so. I think the fault again lies with us, because we have not been able to actually take care of the fault lines that exist in Pakistan, that both Mr. Harun Sharif and Mr. Muid Yusuf referred to. We had to create the economic zones. We had to give competitive policies in those economic zones. We had to ensure that we had enough people, both at the managerial level and at the workers level, who are who have very good vocational training and who are equipped with modern knowledge in order to take that industry forward, in order to be the leading lights of industrialization and development. But unfortunately, we have not been able to do that so far. Of the 4 economic zones that we had prioritized, only 2 are functional. And those also not really at full potential. The others are really just on paper at the moment. So we need to first ensure that we have economic stability, we have political stability, we have security. Now, when the Chinese are complaining about security, they have been doing so for the last 20 years, but they have still, worked on the project, sent their people. But I think it's time for us to seriously think about how we look at security. And security will, again, only come when you have political stability and economic stability. So we really, really need to work on these people, on these problems that we ourselves had, whether it is the lack of knowledge, whether it's the lack of expertise, whether it's the lack of political stability, economic stability, and everything else. Unless we put all those things together, we will not be able to move forward. As far as opening up this entire market, which is now emerging, is concerned, I remember we were young officers when the Central Asian republics became independent. And at that time, the buzzword was connectivity and to reach out to these markets and have those linkages. Now, with Afghanistan's situation being what it is, with Iran already under a lot of sanctions, and with the Middle East situation being what it is, nobody is sure what direction this conflict will take, what will be the the next steps Iran will take. With the US elections, let's see what dispensation comes in and what their political orientation towards China and towards Middle East is, and of course Russia. And that will all affect us because we happen to be in a region which gets affected by these external factors. So this dream of connectivity, this dream of being able to benefit from this emerging market and be an effective player and to lead Pakistan into socio-economic development, a lot of strategic and political things have to be in place. On one side, as at the Western side, I have already spoken about. If you look at the Eastern side, then our relations with India are in a cold freeze, deep freeze for the moment. And there does not seem to be any possibility of any breakthrough right now. So in that, to talk about economic diplomacy, yes, I totally agree. None of our departments actually are aware of what they actually need to do or agree on what they need to do, because there is such a lot of turf wars going on between the various ministries that it is impossible to come together and bring out a strategy. I'll give you the example of China. Kaka Khel Saab is here, is an expert on climate change and adaptation and mitigation. When China published its mitigation and adaptation policy, or their national strategy, there were 17 ministries and 17 departments who owned that strategy, because these things are interlinked. And here, economic diplomacy is the same. National security is the same. Foreign policy is the same. So unless you have all these departments, all these different people with their own sort of orientations and own areas of interest and own lobbies, and they're not coming together, I don't think anything can work. But do we need to be pessimistic? I don't really think so, because we have gone through these difficulties. We have been in the eye of storm right from the day that Pakistan came into existence. But despite East Pakistan, despite the problems that we are facing nowadays of hybrid warfare, despite all our economic difficulties, despite sort of being a high growth and developing country, we are now in the 24th or the 25th IMF loan, the only country that has the largest loan packages. We have somehow still survived. So there is resilience. And but for making this resilience work for the people, first and foremost at the political level, and Mr. Khurram Dastagir Saab is here to comment on
Ma'am,
that.
can I, sorry to interrupt you.
Last sentence. We first have to bring all our political and other stakeholders on one page and have a long-term strategy. I am terribly sorry, whether it's economics or politics or security or climate change or education or health, there is no long-term strategic vision for the country. So unless we put all that together, we will continue to react to the developments in the region and developments in the world, and we cannot be proactive in making what we have work for the people, work for the socio-economic development and progress of Pakistan. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Hashmi. And before I come to my international guests that I'll invite for comments, Khurram Saab, it's all about breaking policy silos. It's all about having a unified narrative for economic diplomacy. And you are the one who have held more than one ministerial positions where you have worked very actively to not only promote Pakistan's trade, economic interests, but also the diplomatic front. So can you share with us the path forward for resilience amidst the comments of the first three speakers?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Thank you very much, Dr. Suleri and Dr. Kaha Khail, for inviting me here this morning. The joke is that the new economic geography, which is the ostensible title of this discussion, is not so new. I mean, Paul Krugman talked about it 34 years ago in one of his lectures at Leuven University. And the idea, as always, before it attracts too much jargon around it, was simply to insert geography into economic theory. And it's sort of now become so well entrenched, has become a cliche. But what do we learn from it? My good friend, Dr. Mead Yusuf, is a very handsome Cassandra, saying nothing is going to happen, we are doomed, which is fine, which is a very logical point of view to take. He's also been, like me, in the trenches of policy making in this country. And yes, economic geography is important. Pakistan's history over the past 77 years has been, in fact, leveraging of its geographical position for foreign policy compromises. That's a one-sentence explanation. We leveraged it during the Cold War, we leveraged it during the first Afghan War, we leveraged it again during the second Afghan War. To what end? That's a very long discussion. But yes, geography played a very important part in how Pakistan behaved, what Pakistan chose to do, which countries Pakistan chose to align itself. So when one talks about Pakistan's future, its geography has to be a part of it. And that's why I value this panel, that we can have some discussion about what are the prospects and what are the pitfalls. But the larger overarching point, I think, and almost all of these panels that I attend end up being a lament for the current state of Pakistan and say, how bad things are and how awful things are going to be. But the foundational issue remains and has to be resolved by ourselves, by all of us who think about these things, is what one of our former foreign secretaries wrote as a subtitle to his book, is Pakistan's resistance to modernity. We have mobile phones, we have all kinds of gadgets, technology, but Pakistan is fundamentally, as a culture and society and government, resisting modernity. And one of the issues that come to fore again and again and again is this lack of articulation, principally by political parties, because they have to take the lead, and the leadership of different parties, about what Pakistan's future should look like. Because it's very easy to just spout jargon and say nice things about what ought to be, but there are certain flashpoints or inflection points that present us with a choice. And while we are presented with that choice, we are unable to articulate the choice clearly. One of the issues, which was alluded earlier, but let me open it up in the spirit of candor brought about by Ambassador Hashmi and, of course, Moeed Yusuf and Harun Saab, is a question of when we say that we are going to give precedence to our economic interests, or geoeconomics, as the national security policy said, over geopolitics. Does it really mean anything when we say, what it really means is, I think in one of the points is, that in our relations with our neighbors, what do we give precedence to? And translated into Urdu, हिंदुस्तान से तजारत करनी है कि नहीं करनी? So that's where then the crunch comes. That whether it's India or it's with Afghanistan or Iran, what do we give real priority to? And given that priority, sort of design things back and say, this is what we are going to do. And yes, we always seem to fall in the pit of security before we can move forward on economics. And the question before us is, and again, these are very stark terms, that whenever anyone talks about in 2024, trading with India, which is an enemy, which is a hostile country, it is hostile to Pakistan internationally, it's hostile to Pakistan internally. Do we trade with India? So the question, an easy part for me as a member of a political party, is to take the emotional line and say, no, we are not going to trade on the blood of the Kashmiri people. And so the question before us, when we talk about new economic geography, is, do we allow these kind of emotional and very emotive and real issues to stand in our way of our economic policies? And so these are not easy questions to answer. These are not easy paths to take. So the articulation in so many issues of such importance and inflection is simply not there. And so the question again is for the policymakers now in government. Fortunately, I'm not there anymore. The choice or the paths that are open to them is how do you articulate a policy that is in Pakistan's actual interest versus a policy that is attractive to that evening's talk shows. That you can take an emotional line and not being able to, as I simply said, do you trade with India or not? That is the question. Do we set aside our emotional insecurity issues and say, yes, trading with India is in Pakistan's interest, not in India's interest. India is now too large an economy, but maybe it's in Pakistan's interest. So as one of my heroes said in another context, which is the American architect Frank Lloyd Wright, he said, a stringent simplification by elimination of the insignificant has to take place. I shall repeat, a stringent simplification by elimination of the insignificant, which is always a very difficult part, because when you are in a policy-making position, so many things are coming at you, and you neither have the time nor the discipline to eliminate the insignificant. But that has to take place. The stringent simplification of Pakistan's real interests is that Pakistan's, yes, we don't want to, no longer wish to leverage our geographical position to make foreign policy compromises. That's wonderful. But the geography is what we have. What surrounds us. Yes, we are surrounded by difficult neighbors. We are surrounded by India and Afghanistan on the east and the west. Iran is also a very, challenging neighbor. So the only unchallenging neighbor that can lend us a hand is, of course, the North China. And there, I think Ambassador Hashmi still sort of kept her counsel. I will say it openly, what I believe is Pakistan's utter inability to benefit from China's rise to superpower status. As one of China's closest friends and allies, while China is now in a hyper league. And we have been, just talking about a few tens of billions there and a tens of billions there, when in fact, had we learned the right lessons at the right time, which we haven't, but the right time to begin something right is today. We can even now begin to overcome our resistance to modernity and realize that economic growth in the 21st century, and this is my final point, requires opening up. It requires opening our minds. It requires opening up our country. And it requires opening up our political discourse to these very difficult questions. I repeat, there are no easy answers to this. But the idea that you have to give precedence to Pakistan's economic interests, no matter how difficult they might be politically, is something that has to be put on the table and has to be said not once, but 3 times a day. By all, the opposition doesn't want to say it, but political parties in government have to say this. That this is what we are facing, instead of just tiptoeing around the issue or just getting through that day's talk shows, as I usually do, is something that needs to be articulated, that Pakistan needs to open itself up. And one of the things that issues that are arising, very relevant issue, that we are talking about and will be talked about since it's STPI, and there's very deep interest and foundational, I think, expertise here under Dr. Suleri and Dr. Kaga Khail about climate change and resilience is what to do about the smog in Lahore. And if farmers in Indian Punjab are burning the stubble, which ends up here, or there are coal plants in Indian Rajasthan which are blowing their smog across the border, what does one do? Do again we raise up the emotive issue of Kashmir, or we actually begin to deal with this? That is the question. For I think too long, we hide around these emotional or attractive issues which allow us to evade the difficult questions, because climate change is a subject that ignores borders altogether. Borders are irrelevant. So how does one then talk about the building resilience when the challenge is coming from the other side of the border? I'm not saying that there's not enough challenges within the border, but yes, and it will require some kind of diplomacy, international action. And so all these issues require us, ladies and gentlemen, and I urge you to do this, and the young people in the audience too, is to open up our minds. Stop resisting modernity. Stop hiding behind emotive issues to evade real problems. And as policymakers, as economists, as analysts, it's our job. It's our first duty to reflect the reality of the society we live in. And from that reality, which I hope we will be able to define with that stringent simplicity, will show us, and I'm not saying I have, of course, not have all the answers, cannot have, is to at least begin to look in the right direction. And once knowing the right direction, which is opening up our mind and society, begin to walk that path. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Khurram Saab. As always, very enlightening and very thought-provoking. Now, let me now ask my international guests 5 minutes each. Dushni, the topic that we are discussing is leveraging new economic geography. And I was really curious to find out that whether Sri Lanka, in your opinion, is ready to embark upon leveraging the new economic geographies, and the type of discussion that you heard for the last an hour. Do you feel the same challenges and same problems there? Dushni, if you can come here perhaps on the roster, that would help. Thank you. So, here. Dr. Dushni Veerakon is the Executive Director of Institute of Policy Studies in Sri Lanka, our partner organization in Sri Lanka. Yes, Dushni.
First point I want to make is listening to the issues surrounding Pakistan. I mean, it's pretty much the kind of conversations that we have in Sri Lanka as well. And in our case, I think it has been more a case of, we try to project Sri Lanka's location as one of its key economic advantages. But at the same time, there is also the fact that, there is the phrase, the tyranny of location. Because of our strategic location, we have had or been sort of engulfed in all kinds of regional and global rivalries that's going on. One point that was made by one of the speakers earlier was that if the country internally is strong, that you can withstand some of these pressures. That rings very true in the case of Sri Lanka. I'll give you one example in the fact that over the last decade or so, we have been borrowing from regional partners, etc. And when it came to the economic crisis and the need to restructure our debt, internal weaknesses meant that, we were parceling out bits and pieces to get all our creditors on board and help us get through the restructuring process. So I think it is very pertinent to keep in mind that economic policy is not today within our control alone. Diplomacy, commercial diplomacy means we do engage much more aggressively out there in search of markets, in search of finance, etc. And if we ignore the political and the larger developments that are taking place, you do end up getting caught up in all of that. And it comes home when you have a crisis on your hands and you need to deal with all of it. Final point is, even for us, I don't think we have a clear idea about what Sri Lanka's foreign policy is going to be in the next decade. We are bilateral creditors. We have China, we have India. Our sovereign bond creditors are in the and Japan is also part of our bilateral creditors. So it's a very complex situation. And I think that drawing lessons from what I've heard on Pakistan, again, we know all of this, but we have not put it down into a workable strategy in that will work for us in the coming years. I'm going to stop there.
Thank you, Dr. Veerakund, for a very precise and comprehensive comment. Dr. Pars Kharal, Executive Director of South Asia Watch on Trade, Economics and Environment, SOTI, Nepal. Doctor, if you can also join me on the rostrum, and the same question that I asked Dushni. I just wanted to get your take on Nepal's readiness and preparedness to get advantage of leveraging new economic geographies. And do you also find that Nepal is facing similar challenges that Pakistan and Sri Lanka are facing?
Thank you, Abid Saab, for this opportunity. And it's always good to be in Pakistan and to hear diverse views that we in other contexts are not generally exposed to. And just to pick up the point raised by the gentleman who spoke earlier, the Saib, who is associated with a political party, that Pakistan has not been able to, as I understood, really derive benefits from China, although China is a staunch ally and partner of Pakistan, despite the potential. And in the context of Nepal, which is a landlocked country, landlocked from all sides by India and China, we have not been able to capitalize on these two huge markets. And this aspiration to diversify trade and transit ties actually prompted Nepal, along with Bangladesh in 1985, to float the idea of SAARC. And then India and Pakistan, Maldives, Sri Lanka, all collaborated, and SAARC was created. And we want to diversify our ties. And I enjoy eating, say, biryani and other variety of foodstuffs when in Pakistan. And the cardamom that goes into biryani, for example, in Pakistan, the large cardamom, some of them must have been sourced all the way from Nepal, although you would buy it from maybe Dubai, UAE, because we sell it, almost 99% of it, to India, and then it gets transshipped to Middle Eastern countries and reroute back to Pakistan. And traders in Nepal are exploring options, to export directly to Pakistan, which is where an initiative like SAARC is very important for a landlocked, country. And think of milk tea. You consume milk tea as we do, and that black tea is quite in high demand in Pakistan. And it's not, to my understanding, a product in which you have a genuine comparative advantage, so that, importing more of it from Nepal wouldn't hurt. But then transit and connectivity issues are important. And here I would like to highlight that I see some winds of change in the region, particularly with the dramatic or drastic political changes in Bangladesh of August, after which the new government or regime there including the head of state or advisor, Dr. Yunus, as well as those who are supporting him there, in his cabinet, have been in various statements, whether meeting the ambassador of Pakistan there or with other countries' representatives, emphasizing the importance of SARC and how to revive it. Now, just recall, on the eve of the August changes there, such pronouncements did not, come. So I see, a change there. And I think this augurs well for, taking SARC forward. This should be helpful. Secondly, yes, India-Pakistan ties have affected, SARC. That's a fact. But again, as an economist, I can just give a political solution. But at the same time, I do see a positive development in the sense that India and China have just reached a border deal. And at the same time, the Indian foreign minister also attended, the SCO summit in Pakistan. And then if Pakistan and India are both members of SCO, Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and they can come together and talk, then at least having a conversation within SARC itself, where you don't always have to make commitments, you can at least, converse. If it is okay to converse in SCO, then perhaps a simpleton like me, you can have conversation within the aegis of SARC. And that, I think, will help things forward. Pakistan, as per rigorous econometric estimates, has tremendous potential with South Asia, including India, including Nepal and other countries. Research have shown that. So this is something, and SARC already has certain institutional structures in place that can easily be revived. Think of a SARC center in Islamabad, in Dhaka, in Nepal. They are there. And it's not that work hasn't been done, but it has been in a state of coma, which I think must be revived. And finally, the point about smog, right? Which is the most, appropriate forum to discuss these issues of cross-border, pollution or the transfer of smog from one country to another. It's good old SARC. With these words, I would like to, pause here and thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Dr. Karan, especially for bringing in SARC here. I think it's years now we have stopped discussing SARC, but it's good to hear an external perspective on it. And that brings me to the final comment of this round. Dr. Rajan Ratna, who is the director of UNESCAP's South and West Asia and Pacific's office. So, Dr. Ratna, you have regional context, and of course, in UNESCAP, there is a lot of discussion going around on how to prepare the region to get advantage of the new economic geographies. You are also, I know, a staunch supporter of regional cooperation on SDGs, and of course on smog, which you will be a key panelist in a session tomorrow. But I just wanted to get your reflection of what we have heard so far from UNESCAP's point of view. And of course, you can give your personal opinion, nothing to do with your organizational affiliation.
Thank you, Avid Bhai. Assalamu alaikum, good morning, everybody, and greetings, which I bring from India to all of you. This is such a passionate subject. 5 minutes is too less. And I know everybody in the hall can speak for long on this issue. It's not only about economic resilience, it's not only about regional cooperation, it's also about prosperity, peace, building development, uplifting poor. The reality is that this region, South Asia, we host one third almost of the, or 1/4 quarter of the world population, but still we host half of the poor of the world. And that is a reality. Now, with that, it was really enlightening to hear to all the panel members, and I do not want to join in the debate, but I would like to highlight certain points. We have been working, and I can give you statistics, but I will not. But I was hearing to Harun Sahib when he was talking about this motorway from Islamabad to Lahore. Of course, it may not make an economic sense, perhaps. But it has a lot of impact in the country. And when we are looking at, in fact, one of the work which we are working on is on cross-border trade, connectivity. Many of the countries with whom we are working, every country is a part of Asian Highway, very good road and everything. But when you go at the border, there are bottlenecks which kill the whole spirit of these connectivity. There is a disconnect between the policymaker at a capital and the people who are sitting at the border, whether it is immigration, whether it is custom, whether it is a police force, or whether it is the local community. Most of the local communities, they don't feel they are part of the broader policy making at a country level. So when we talk about all these, those aspects need to be addressed, and actually this is the part of the work which we are doing. Definitely, it's not only for Pakistan that it requires India, but also India requires Pakistan. Each country in the region require each other for shared prosperity. Despite all those political differences, there was a ray of light in terms of crisis when COVID came. It didn't take 2 weeks' time for all the heads of nation to sit down, talk, and create a COVID fund under the SARC during that period of time. So if there is a call, there is a common challenge which the region or a sub-region faces, the countries have demonstrated that they can come out with the solutions, with the innovation in the old spirit of brotherhood. The second example which I want to give is that of ASEAN and that of European Union. Do the countries within that regional grouping not have differences? They have many disputes among themselves. But still, it is the economic interest of that regional integration which has bound them together. And they work together. Connectivity, regional integration, free trade agreement, European Union has gone for custom union. They all have suffered. If you look at their history, they have so much dispute, they were fighting against each other. Unfortunately, this part of the world, we have not learned the lesson from the history. And perhaps we do not want to learn lesson from our own past mistakes. What is required in the economic resilience? Not only to look into a cross-border dimension, but also have, and I agree with Dushni, within the country, all the countries have a very large market, but that is often neglected. The third is, whenever we make the policies, we perhaps somehow forget about the consumers. So whenever we put the restrictions, we do not look at the consumer. So whether it is an MFN issue or a 200% duty which is being put, it's the consumer who pays, because the trade happens. If it doesn't happen directly, it happens historically, it is happening through other countries. The traders are benefiting, the middlemen are benefiting, but not the consumers and an average people. And the last dimension which was touched upon, and that is what Abid Bhai also said, is the panel which we are organizing tomorrow, is the cross-border implication of the climate change. Whenever straw is burned in Punjab of India, depending on the air flow, it can go either to Delhi or it can come to Pakistan. Similarly, on the Pakistan, if it happens, it can go to the other side, and you cannot stop that. We did this study for Nepal, we did this for Bangladesh, Pakistan, and India, for 4 countries. And we found that there are a lot of good practices which the countries are also practicing. They have policies giving incentives, but at the same time, they are also penalizing the farmers. But the technological upgradation for the farmers and the realization for the farmers to use these technologies is another challenge, which is creating a problem. And that is what we are going to discuss tomorrow. We are bringing the farmers from Indian side. We are happy, thankful to STPI, who have brought the farmers from Pakistan side. We'll have some policymakers, and we see how we can dwell upon these issues of cross-border implications. The last thing which I want to touch on economic, it is the ESCAP and World Bank, we have a trade cost database. So we look into the bilateral trade cost, how much it costs you to trade in terms of ad valorem duty. Now, if Pakistan or India has to trade with US or Europe, the trade cost is lesser than trading with Bangladesh, with Pakistan, or between India and Pakistan. And I'm not talking about these duties and MFN. It's also about the infrastructure, the documentation, the procedural part. And that is where perhaps this region and the countries would need to look into building the digital infrastructure. The world is changing, the trade pattern is changing, e-commerce is the order of the day. Unless the countries adopt to the digital policies and bring their documentary requirement, lessen them, and make the burdensome process convert into the digital, make it online, the life will not be easy. We'll be way, way behind. And I don't want to touch upon IR4, computerization and automation, because this part of the world, we still have comparative advantage on the basis of labor. But in coming years, things are going to change. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Rajan. And now I'll come to my panelists. 3 minutes each, quick rapid fire rounds. Mohit, you said that we have been talking among each other for last many years. That's why I brought in Dushni and Paras and Rajan, so that you can get some new audience and you can listen to them and you can respond. Any recommendations for way forward? So we have discussed in the previous round the state of affair. Of course, a lot needs to be done and a lot of improvements required. But if you have to recommend 1, 2, 3 quick recommendations that are a prerequisite for Pakistan to get advantage from the new economic geographies that are shaping around us, what would be the 3 major recommendations that you can give us?
Thank you, Dr. First of all, let me just say that it is not that everything is bad. It is not that we are doomed. I actually have the opposite view. My concern is that there is a path to recovery which is fairly easy. Within 5, 7, 10 years, you can see yourself where we want to be, but you've got to do certain things for it. And the world is in a very fluid state. The colleagues from Sri Lanka, India, I mean, all of them are saying the same thing. Nobody really knows where we're going to end up, because the evolving geopolitical order is going to be very turbulent and fluid. But herein lies the opportunity. Countries who actually get their act together and go for that opportunity will benefit tremendously, and others will lose out. And you want to be on the side of the winners. That's basically the point. In terms of your recommendations, number 1, we must stop lying to ourselves about our opportunities and challenges. I think Khurram Sahab has put it nicely. If your worldview revolves around what you are going to say in the evening talk show that, by the way, nobody watches anymore, then we're going to continue doing what we are doing. So the first thing is speak the truth to ourselves about our challenges and opportunities and what we will require to get where we need to go. So that's number 1. And we are not doing that at this point, in my view. Second, if you want to go in the direction that we've talked about, create a formal coordination structure for the government of Pakistan to focus on economic diplomacy, get all the critical stakeholders involved, make that the priority, change the model of who represents economic diplomacy internationally for Pakistan, bring in specialists, and you will see gradually there will be a change in the kind of export, FDI, etc. that you will bring in. Third and most important, internal predictability of policy continuity. I don't want to say political stability, economic stability, no. The thing that investors and the thing that the private sector transaction makers want is knowing that whatever policies you are putting in place, whether it is to fight a war with everybody or to connect with everybody, you have longevity to them. tell them today that for the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years, this is my policy, good or bad, you will see things change. You do these three things, I think within 10 years, Pakistan will be exactly where we want to be. You don't do it, stop pretending that somehow a miracle is going to happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Mohit. Ambassador Hashmi, the same three recommendations we want from you.
Quick, to begin with, I think we need to put our house in order, and in all aspects, whether it's political, economic, social, everything, because I personally feel that we are in a societal collapse that needs to be arrested. So we need to put our house in order and put our democracy back on track and let it flourish. Secondly, I think we need to let the government take care of government business and other people take care of their own areas of jurisdictions, and let the private sector lead the economic development of the country. It is not for the government to do business. And thirdly, as one of your speakers also said, that we need to actually open up our minds and open up our way of thinking and align it with the new realities that are emerging in the region and around the world. And if we continue to just be focused and feel threatened, then we will really not be able to move forward. So we will have to build that resilience to face challenges head on and make the positive changes. Thank you.
Khurram Sahab.
Ji, thank you very much. My first recommendation for the government will be to say very clearly that, although there's some dispute on that, but economic growth or job creation, could be any of the two, will be the principal driver of the government policy, as clearly as possible. And every policy that government announces has to be judged on that one yardstick, whether it promotes job creation or doesn't promote job creation, because job creation is a direct outcome of investment. So that will push us towards getting more investment, not just foreign investment, but also domestic investment, which is the major issue of this lack of domestic investment in this country. So first is announcements of that goal, and that was sort of an obsessive yardstick, saying that this is what is really significant, this is what we need to do. The second thing is to think about, and something we didn't discuss, is to, in my view, I can take a radical view now, is to open ourselves radically to our regional countries and to say, okay, whether it's Bangladesh or Nepal or Bhutan or Sri Lanka, we are going to unilaterally cut our tariffs, bring them down to 5%, open ourselves up and say, okay, we are open for trade. Are you open for trade? And because the reason I don't say India is, and maybe it could be a topic for another STPI panel, is SAARC is dead. And I think Happy Mon Jacobs' piece in Foreign Affairs recently saying the end of South Asia means that if one country deems itself to be, has grown too large for its region, then the rest of the countries could get together and do what they need to do, is to open themselves up and not wait for India to at least, Urdu mein kehte hain, nazar-e-iltifat chote mulkon pe aayegi. So it's not wait for it. Just open ourselves up and say we are committed to opening our trade with our smaller regional partners, and we will do it. And, put your money where your mouth is and start cutting tariffs. The third thing I think is, again, very important in terms of economic geography is, while, as Dr. Moeed Yusuf correctly pointed out, not committing ourselves, is to begin a serious study of China and India. I think we are woefully uninformed. And when it comes to China and actually most of our other international partners, we see them as very crude transactional terms and not understanding of where those countries are coming from and why they make certain policies and why they behave diplomatically in a way that they do. Because what drives our policy currently is to see where the next tranche of international aid or support is going to come from. That has to go. Because if you're just focused on the next tranche, and you're not looking at the next 10 years or 15 years, you will make bad decisions. And we have made decisions that at that time, 10 years ago or 15 years ago, seemed reasonably rational, but turned out not to be in Pakistan's long-term interests. Finally, I do want to say this because Ambassador Hashmi is sitting here, is that she and I, together, I as Commerce Minister and she as our ambassador in Brussels, probably we were a dynamic duo of economic diplomacy in Brussels, and the result is that this is the 11th year of European Union's GSP plus trade concessions to Pakistan. They didn't happen accidentally, ladies and gentlemen. Your elected representatives and your diplomats worked very hard, not once, but multiple times every 2 years to make it happen. So yes, and this is essentially a coordination between the Commerce Ministry and Ministry of Foreign Affairs, that if these two ministries that at that time were aligned to achieve a certain objective, and lo and behold, we achieved that objective. So good things can take place if people at the top are aligned together. And at that time, I'm glad to say I was a part of it and also saw Nagbana Hashmi and her predecessor, Munawar Saab, what was his name? Munawar Saab, who has passed away, unfortunately, in action, and to see that at that time, and this is the diplomacy in action, it wasn't just Brussels. All our ambassadors in the European capitals of the European Union were working simultaneously with us in Brussels and in Islamabad to make it happen. And Alhamdulillah, now it's the 11th year GSP Plus. So good things can take place. Thank you very much.
And that brings me to Harun. You started it, and now you have to conclude it as well.
Take questions
We have, we don't have,
I can close,
yes.
but then you can take one or two questions if they are there. Yeah, thank you very much. I started the debate and became very lively. And I would like to sum up very quickly on the messages. I think Mueed Yusuf is spot on that the nations who do not get out of denial keep on, promoting the status quo. Emerging for people, it's not only if it is China as Pakistan, China will look for other alternatives because they want to develop the region for their own good. So I think that's a very clear. In terms of coordination, I think Khurram Saab has mentioned when I used to work with him, we used to have a shared term that our lives are hostage to an endless coordination, if we recall. So the question is that we need to, I think it's a mindset within the state. Once I advised when late Sartaj Aziz Saab was foreign minister, what Khurram Saab is saying, that why don't you merge Ministry of Commerce and Foreign Ministry? And he said that let's go to Mr. Tariq Fatmi. So I went to Fatmi Saab and he basically agreed with me. I told him 8 countries have done it. He said, Arun Saab, it's a very appropriate thing to think about, but there will be blood on the streets. Now that tells you the mindset that how jealously political and bureaucratic elite, guards and don't talk to each other. So that cycle has to be broken, and that can only be done, through our political leadership, none others. We have tried SIFC and others, but it's a political convening process, cannot be done by force, unfortunately. Coming down to, Ambassador Nagmana, I think her point is, spot on, that we have not really leveraged our partnership with China. And as Khurram Saab says, that if the mindset is that you need a bailout or a tranche, then how do you basically think wider? If our politician thinks that let's buy out few more months, then this whole regional market concept will remain there, and this transition will happen. I have very carefully chosen the word transition. I could have said transformation. I don't think countries around us are ready for a transformation. But this transition will happen, but it can take 50 years. But if you put your house in order, it will be much, quicker. A couple of other points which have come out, which are, extremely critical. Ambassador Hashmi says that let private sector, rise up and do the things. But just look at it, like government, it's a joke. What we saw here on PIA privatization, and now provinces are saying they're willing to buy it. Now, is that the way you think like a modern economy? So we need to be responsible. In terms of opening us, one couldn't agree more, with Khurram Saab. But Khurram Saab, my question is that, it is first the mindset, as you have mentioned, then the policies happen. And as Mueed is saying very rightly, that people want predictable, credible policies. That's where I would add one thing, Abid. I think the critical thing is that we have too much centralized politically our economic and social policy. State does not have the capability to deliver. I think Islamabad is not the place for all that. So one needs to work about deregulation of things. Countries have done it, and Pakistan should think about it. On the lighter term of SAARC, again, a few friends, including Mr. Khurram Dastagir, we were thinking of writing an obituary of SAARC, but it's glad that my friend from Nepal has brought it back. But my question is, we have tried our level best. It is up here. If the region wants to work together, then we cannot be friends, but let's behave. Don't resist to the changes, of which Khurram Saab said modernity, as Riaz Muhammad Khan Saab has said, but also learn to be responsible neighborhood. You cannot be best friends, but you can be responsible and, look for people. So my closing, Abid, is here that the world around us has changed. The Western interests have gone inward looking. We have a young, large population which one can capitalize on. China has not invested much in understanding neighboring economies, but put in transactions on table. Now it is the time to give a clear path that how we can work with multiple partners, but our bargaining power, I think the colleague from Sri Lanka mentioned, our bargaining power in that game will only rise if you are not totally dependent on economic bailouts. Unfortunately, and economic bailouts which are not based on an economic proposition, which are actually based on geopolitical and geostrategic partnerships. We are offering, unfortunately, the same to Saudi Arabia and China. So we need to look at market dynamics and come up with something. We have the wherewithal. The positive message is that the demography, if this old school does not change its mindset, I think demography, the way it is in Pakistan, it will dictate itself in 10 years' time, either way. So thank you very much for being patient. I would have loved to take some questions from the audience, but it's up to Abid Suleri if he has the time clock permitting him. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Harun, Moeed, Ambassador Sabah, from Dastagir, Dushni, Paras, and Rajan. I think it was a wonderful discussion. We have to start our next panel in this room at 12:30, and my team is reminding me that they have to redo the whole setting for that session. And that's why, unfortunately, I'll not be able to take questions. But Khamsa would inform us what the next 4 panels are, which would be taking place from 12:30 to 2 o'clock. Please, it's an a la carte menu. Choose the panel of your choice and do join it. I couldn't do the timekeeping right, but I hope the other moderators, they would be able to do the timekeeping and take questions as well. Over to you.
Thank you so much to our honorable speakers and our partner from Sri Lanka, Nepal, and India for their thought-provoking discussion and points. Yeah, may I request our unit head, STC unit head, Ms. Usma, and her team members, Taiba and Sarah, to join us on podium. And may I request our panel organizer, Hassan and Asim, to join us on stage for group 4-2. Dr. Rajanratna, please join us on stage.